Hello, welcome back to Asian Cinema Season. Today we have yet another special guest in Ryan Chattaway, an old friend of the channel's, of course, the creator of the 24-hour movie marathon. I'll leave a link to his channel at the end of this video if you haven't seen him before. Go check out all his awesome movie-related content, but today he'll be talking to you about Godzilla movies, and it couldn't be more perfect. We just reviewed Shin Godzilla, so Ryan, a self-proclaimed Godzilla fanatic, is going to talk to you about all things Godzilla. So sit back, enjoy. Here we go with Ryan Chattaway.
Hey everybody, Ryan Chattaway here, coming at you with my top 5 favorite Godzilla films. Now, as you can tell, wearing a Godzilla shirt, have most of my Godzilla films displayed behind me. I have plenty more right here that I'm going to talk about. I have this little guy. He's covered in dust because he's been a display piece, but I think that adds to the nature of him. The dust kind of reminds me of dirt and snow from the earth and anyways, I'm not here to play with toys. I'm here to talk about a franchise that is near and dear to my heart, and that is the Godzilla franchise. For those of you who don't know, the Godzilla franchise originally started out as kind of like a protest to the United States in regards to us testing bombs and everything in the Pacific, and so the Japanese and some of their film industry created Godzilla, who is basically a personification of what happens whenever bombs and the atomic wars and all that kind of stuff happen, and that is that nature comes back and destroys you, basically. And that's basically what Godzilla originated as. And later, they came out with an Americanized version called Godzilla King of the Monsters, and to say it was a good film is definitely not necessarily true. It's very fun, but basically they took the original Japanese 1954 film and they recut it with Raymond Burr, an American actor, in a lot of the scenes. They took out a lot of the original stuff, but that's neither here nor there. Became a massive success and spawned countless sequels. The Godzilla franchise now has 34 films over the course of 60 years. So today I'm going to talk about some of the ones that I love. I've always been fascinated with the kaiju genre, and mainly Godzilla in particular. So when Luke invited me on, I was like, you know what? Why not talk about Godzilla? I love Godzilla. Might as well spread my love of it and maybe drop a little bit of context and history behind the franchise as well. Real quick, let me get out my phone. It has I jotted down some notes on it. Just kind of going to give a little run through of the franchise. And basically, the Godzilla franchise is broken up into different eras, different periods that you may hear people who are fans of the genre talk about. And it isn't just Godzilla films. Any kaiju film in general will have the same classification. And that is from 1954, when the first Godzilla came out, to the 1975 film. That was known as the Showa era. And when they talk about the eras, they're referring to the leadership in Japan at the time. So we had the Showa era, which is an era that has a mix of serious Godzilla, like the first one, and you have some pretty child-friendly Godzilla films in there as well, like All Monsters Attack and Son of Godzilla. Some of the goofy things that you would see in a Godzilla film would be in the Showa era. Later, starting in 1984 with the Godzilla 1984, is the Heisei era, and that was from 84 to 95. Now, I have heard some people say technically Godzilla 84 is part of Showa based on because of the leadership at the time, and they've always considered it as a Heisei film because it started the new reboot in the new series. So it kind of goes both ways, but it's pretty much always been classified officially as part of the Heisei era that lasted until 95. And that was an era that was actually very serious in tone. All these are all kind of out of order. I did that just to make it to where it was just all over the place. But there is a significant change in tone with the Heisei era. It is a lot more serious, a lot darker, and Godzilla has kind of been replaced as not necessarily a good guy. He started as a force of nature. You know, he would destroy anybody that gets in his way, and then eventually he turned in kind of the anti-hero, the kind of a goofball kind of, you know, I'm gonna save you kind of Godzilla. I mean, not exactly like that, but for the most part, he wasn't just considered evil. Now, Godzilla 84 brought it back to its roots. So, up until 95, that's how it was. And then, the Americans decided to get involved. And that is when Roland Emmerich in 96 or 97, I always forget exactly what year that movie came out. Maybe even 98. I keep forgetting because I don't really care for the film. So that's actually, I don't own that movie because I don't really like it. That is when the American film industry came out with Godzilla, who is basically just a big iguana. In fact, since that film came out, you know, the official Toho Godzilla company has basically officially renamed that creature Zilla. And more of like, you know, the Americans thought they saw Godzilla, but it actually really wasn't. It was just another kaiju. And that's kind of where it's at. And then in 1999, Godzilla 2000 came out. And this is the beginning of the Millennium Era. Now, they could have continued to call it the Heisei Era, but they considered it completely different in tone and style than the rest of the Heisei films. And there was such a gap between them that they were like, you know what, let's just start this new series. And they called it the Millennium Series. And that lasted until about 2004. And that ended with Godzilla Final Wars. Now, Godzilla Final Wars, to me, isn't really the greatest film, but there's some people that really like it. But with that film, it ended the Godzilla franchise as we knew it at that time. Then, word started getting around that the Americans wanted to give it another shot. And Toho was actually approving this, and it was going to be amazing. And so that led to the 2014 Godzilla, directed by Gareth Edwards, which I really, really enjoyed. I loved it when I first saw it, and I've seen it countless times since, and I still really, really enjoy it. The more that time goes by, the more that I see things about it that I don't really care about as much, but I still consider it a top-notch film, and I'm so glad that they did it. Because now we have Kong Skull Island, that was phenomenal, and they're going to be coming out with other Godzilla films. You know, Godzilla 2 is going to have King Ghidorah and Mothra and Rodan returning, and it's just going to be phenomenal. It's going to be culminating in Godzilla versus King Kong in 2020, they say. So that's where the franchise is at. And last year, a couple years ago, Toho was like, you know what, let's get back in the business of Godzilla. So they came out with their own reboot. And that in itself was one of the best films that I had seen in a while of that genre. And they don't plan on making any more, at least until I think 2020 because of rights stuff. Or they have a contract with Legendary where they can't do anything. I forget how that all goes, but yeah, so they rebooted the Godzilla franchise. And so Godzilla is big as ever now. Literally, he is as big as he's ever been. The Godzilla that they use for all these films nowadays is way bigger than the Godzilla of the past. Alright, so now I guess it's time to get into my top 5. I wanted to give a little bit of context to it. And I kind of want to make this a good rambling type video because I know some people like those kind of videos and I know Luke does. So, and plus Luke, you could edit this any way you please, even if you wanted me to just dive into my top 5. But let's go ahead and talk about my top 5 Godzilla films. And the first one, I'm going to actually go just, let me see. You know what? Let's go in order. It's basically self-explanatory for some of these, but let's go ahead and start with number 5. And that would be where's the date? 1972's Godzilla on Monster Island, or Godzilla vs. Gigan. And some people say Gigan. I've always just said Gigan. This film is pretty cool. Now, this film and the film I'm going to talk about after this are not really considered all that great Godzilla films, but I enjoy the heck out of them. Now, this one is basically about some ruthless, I guess you could say, theme park tycoons who are making a theme park based on Godzilla and all the other creatures. But it turns out that they are actually aliens, and they have a huge plan to basically destroy the world, you know, in typical Godzilla fashion. Not necessarily destroy the world, but cause some issues, I guess you could say. And, question. What is 65 meters tall, has a buzzsaw in its stomach, and hooks for hands? Answer. Godzilla's not sure either, but he's got to fight it, and King Ghidorah anyway. That's what it says on the back. But, yeah, so what I like about this film is it kind of takes the approach of if a crew that was trying to make, like, a Disney World just had some different intentions, and then you realize that they're aliens, and it just makes it a completely insane premise. And so you have these like monster battles in this theme park as well, and the set designs and everything on these are amazing. Of course, it's all miniatures. I forgot exactly what the actual point of... Yeah, they were planning on wiping out human life. See, that's the thing about these films. I've seen them all countless times, but the goofier ones, like, you don't really care as much about the plot as much as you do about the goofiness. So you always kind of, and that's what makes it fun each time, because you kind of forget exactly what happened, because it's all about the fights between all the creatures and everything like that. So so this is my 5th favorite. Next up, we have the other one that I was just referring to, Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. And this film came out in 1971. And this is actually one of the first Godzilla films I ever saw. Godzilla vs. Hedorah. But I've always just called it Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. But basically, this is the first Godzilla film I saw. I think it was like a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon when I was a kid on like the Sci-Fi Channel with a terrible English dub. It was horribly edited, and the quality was it was just disgusting. It was just a terrible transfer, kind of like a lot of these films back in the day. But this one is basically an allegory about pollution and humans just polluting the earth. And so basically the whole premise of this villain is that he was basically created by humans because of pollution, and that's basically what he started from. There's always like these little fun quotes on the back of these DVDs, or these Blu-rays. Hedorah wants to snuff the planet with sludge and toxic gas, but first he's got to fight Godzilla, who'll kick his smoggy mass. And so that's what the Smog Monster basically looks like. This is a really, really fun one. There's some really interesting music scenes in this film. So it was like kind of like some psychedelic musical numbers with like nightclubs and that kind of thing, and it makes it even more interesting. But this is a really trippy kind of film. But there's some people that just really don't like it, but this was one of the first ones I ever saw, so it will always hold a close place in my heart. Okay, next up is one I also was just talking about, and it is the reboot from a couple years ago, Shin Godzilla. Now, Shin Godzilla is Toho's reboot, like I said, but they basically treat Godzilla as if he's never been to Earth before. They wipe out all the established history of Godzilla and start from day one. And this is a brand new look at Godzilla. What I like about it is that it has like a really smart political kind of backstory and plot that has to do with the situation in the world at the time. And it's actually not dumb, and it's pretty complex, and there's so many layers to it. That and the creature's design is great. It's been kind of controversial, the creature's design, because of the fact that he's kind of a walking atomic bomb, because he basically looks like he's bleeding and there's fire all over him. But he's humongous. It is a humongous interpretation of Godzilla. Sorry if you hear jets overhead. There's actually a Blue Angels weekend going on right now in my town. So yes, Godzilla, or Shin Godzilla, which it was originally in America called Godzilla Resurgence. But then they finally realized that America isn't incredibly stupid and they could deal with a movie called Shin Godzilla. Plus, Independence Day Resurgence came out, and I think that maybe had something to do with it, about changing the name. But I'm glad they kind of stuck it to this. So yes, Shin Godzilla number 4. Alright, next up is 1999's Godzilla 2000. This is a film that I remember seeing in the theaters with a friend when it came out in the United States, and it was not very well received here. People will not go see a movie, like Godzilla movie, if it wasn't made by America. And I mean, some people will, but it's just, that's one thing that's always boggled my mind about cinema, is I feel like so many Americans just have to remake everything because they don't think their audiences will watch it. And there's some truth to that. But either way, Godzilla 2000 basically picks up, it doesn't really have any established history with the previous films, but it does reference the original film. I'm pretty sure it references the original film. And basically a UFO comes to Earth, and wait a second. Actually, it was more like a rock. It was like a rock that was like found in the ocean, and then it lifted out of the ocean and actually was a UFO. And then it turns out this UFO, and it kind of looks like the alien spacecraft in Arrival. But it eventually turns out that the UFO is actually a monster. And the power of a monster, and basically it creates a monster who begins to fight with Godzilla. And that is what this film is about. And it has some amazing fight scenes. And this is always going to be one of my go-to Godzilla films to watch when I just want to throw something in and have fun. And it just has some phenomenal Godzilla fight scenes with the monster. And and this is actually the first and only time that this monster that's in this movie actually appeared. And because basically what it is, it's a monster that like connects to any living thing, and it kind of takes on some of their structure. And it somehow gets a piece, and I can't exactly remember how, but it gets a piece of Godzilla's DNA, and it starts transforming into a Godzilla, but not exactly, because of other complications that happen. But yeah, so basically Godzilla tries to fight himself without actually being, another Godzilla. So it's just a fun film. Godzilla 2000. Alright, well I guess this isn't actually a top 5. This is more of a top 6. So, because I just realized I've talked about 4, and I still have 2 left in my stack. So let's make this a top 6. Next up is my favorite Godzilla sequel. And this is probably not the most popular choice, but I love this so much, and I like to double bill this with the one I will be talking about after this, which is my favorite one. Godzilla Raids Again. This film came out pretty much right after Godzilla 54. And the studio was basically like, it's a success. Let's get a sequel out as soon as possible. And that's basically what they did. And it takes place pretty soon after the events of the first Godzilla film. But what I like about this is that it's one of the only black and white, actually I think it's the only black and white Godzilla sequel, and there's something about Godzilla when he's fighting, I always get pronounce his name wrong, but he fights Anguirus in this film, and the fight scenes, they had the camera's exposure rate like at a really high pace, I'm pretty sure that's what it was, and so they look like they're fighting in fast motion, and so it kind of it's kind of really fake looking because of that, but I think it adds to the charm in this film, and I just really like it. So I always like to double bill this one with my favorite one, which is Godzilla from 1954, and this is the Criterion set. What I love about this Criterion set, which I've already talked about what this film is about, basically it's about, you know, what happens because the United States keeps doing all these nuclear testings. We awaken all this creature that is living in like a little pocket hole inside the earth in the ocean. But what I like about Godzilla on Criterion is, let me take this little booklet out, is that you open it up like this, and Godzilla comes out like that. Now, that's pretty much it in regards to what the films I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to talk about something that's in the rumor mill right now. Recently, I forgot who posted the article, but somebody posted an article that talked about how, well, it's not a rumor per se, but Criterion has some kind of rights to some Godzilla films other than the first one, and they are streaming some of these unavailable on Blu-ray Godzilla films, like like Godzilla Raids Again, and some of the ones that are like, All Monsters Attack. They have those films that they're streaming on their streaming platforms with a Criterion logo. And they shared something, and basically it got out that they're eventually probably going to release them on Criterion to join this one. And if that's the case, then we'll hopefully have all the Godzilla films on Blu-ray. Now, there's still some that are in public domain that you can't even find the DVDs for good price, and that is Son of Godzilla and Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, the original. And so hopefully they'll maybe be able to get the rights to those two. They'll release it like in a big Criterion set. Hopefully it'll be between $100 to $200, which the amount of films that are going to be in that set, I'll be all for it. But nobody really knows at this point. You could Google it and see for yourself. But yeah. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on about Godzilla for the past little bit. I hope you enjoyed this video. Luke, thank you so much for having me on here. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you, 'cause